Welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
This is Jessica with Turn the Page podcast at Syosset Library, and I am very lucky to have my guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Laura Geringer Bass. I'm the author of The Girl with More Than One Heart, which just came out from Abrams this past April.
And would you like to talk a little bit about what the name of your book means and what it's about in your words? And I just read the book, and it's fantastic. So we could talk a little bit about that and beyond.
Thank you. Well, to me, the More Than One Heart, Brianna's More Than One Heart in the title, kind of represents her resilience, her capacity for kindness, and her imagination, and her ability to tell her own story and to listen to others with empathy. For me, that's what the title means. It's about Brianna is a 13-year-old girl, and she loses her dad, who's her favorite parent. And the moment that she learns that her dad's heart stops, she imagines that she develops an extra heart deep in her belly that speaks to her in her dad's voice. And it says some very mysterious things like, be your own and find her. So she needs to kind of figure out what that dad heart is saying to her. And in the process, she kind of finds her own voice and is able to navigate her grief.
It's a really beautiful story about just different unique forms of grief. First, so because you'd mentioned, so the More Than One Heart, Brianna's dad heart, it grew in her belly, correct?
Yes, in the belly, right.
So, why did you choose the stomach as the location?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Not that it's a bad location. I was just curious.
Yeah. Well, I think because I actually in the original, and this book went through many, many, many revisions.
Mm-hmm.
In the original, there was more than one dad heart, more than one extra heart. There were about 5 hearts, and they spoke to Brianna from various parts of her body, from her belly, which is her gut,
Yes.
And from her shoulder blades, kind of like where wings would grow if she had wings, and the backs of her knees. And they all had different things to say. And so in the course of the revisions, it became very clear that was not going to work. And it became clear that it should just be her one dad heart. And then the logical place to me was her gut, that because she needed to listen to her own voice, the voice of and her dad's voice was really her own, and she just needed to discover it or rediscover it.
It was really, it was really well done. So the things that her dad heart says, were there, how did you choose the words? I know sometimes it's saying songs to her that her dad used to sing. Mm-hmm. And as you said, and we're going to come back to Be Your Own, it would also say things, like find her, find them, move. Mm-hmm. Move was a big one. Mm-hmm. How did you decide exactly what her dad heart would say?
Well, I kind of had, do you know that old movie Field of Dreams?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. If you build it, they will come.
Yes. Exactly. And so I sort of had that in the back of my mind in a way. And I wanted there to be some mystery. I wanted there to be a kind of a puzzle that she had to piece together. And at times she kind of mishears the
Mm-hmm.
voice, like when the voice tells her let go, she thinks it's saying Lego. And
Right.
she goes on this kind of wild goose chase where she's trying to find these old discarded pieces of Lego she used to play with her dad and put them together and kind of read a message into that.
Yeah.
Um, but the find her really has to do was kind of a personal journey that she realizes she's making to kind of rediscover her mom. She and her mom have grown distant. Her mother, after her dad's death, kind of retreats into a depression. But even before then, um, when her brother is born, her brother is on the autistic spectrum, and her mother needs to quit her job and just focus all of her attention
Yeah.
on this child with special needs. And so I think Brianna harks back to this time. She kind of wants to retreat into childhood and go back into this time, not only before her dad died, but before her brother was born, where she remembers having a kind of happy family or normal family. And So in the process of the book, the heart um, keeps saying "find her," um, which is kind of I mean, not to give anything away, but there is a kind of journey to rediscover her mother, who is the parent who is left, and she finds very imaginative um, and ways of doing that, of trying to rely on good memories with her
Mm-hmm.
mother, times when they were bonded very, very closely from her early childhood, to kind of reconnect with her mother and find her.
It was
Uh,
really well done.
Thank you.
It really was. And because you know, you talk about her mother's relationship. So I mean, the loss of her father, there was so much grief, and I think the loss of her father was the catalyst for her realizing other things she was grieving. Of course, you know, I in a way it seemed like, you know, when her father was alive, her mother, she would say her mother is Aaron's, who's her brother, and her father was hers.
Hmm.
And even though she grieved the relationship with her mother because she had her father, it was almost like she didn't, you know, really do it fully.
Hmm.
And you know, so she was grieving it all over again. You know, really, it brought to the forefront. And also, you know, you say that she wanted to retreat into childhood. With her mother's depression, a lot of the duties for her younger brother, who, while he's brilliant and wonderful, but was a bit of a challenge, fell on her. So her own
Okay.
childhood, she became a parentified child who not only, you know, her mother was in a cocoon of her emotions, but she was responsible for this child who was in kindergarten.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's strange because when I was writing the book, I felt that it was all about my dad. My dad is the model for Grandpa Ben in the book, and you know, he was a storyteller, and he was a wonderful grandpa, and he always had just the right story for my son, and would be able, my son, being on the spectrum, had many meltdowns, epic meltdowns. And somehow my father was always there with the right story to get him out of his uh, bad moods, and make him laugh. And my father called his stories jokes, but they were kind of shaggy dog
Mhm.
jokes. And they were very elaborate and long shaggy dog jokes. and I was able to put one of those. It was called the Golden Navel into the book. Actually, in the original version, there were many more of my dad's stories, but eventually it kind of boiled down to one of them. So when my dad died, I started this book as a memoir of the way he used to tell stories with my son. And so it was kind of the core and the inspiration for the novel. And then I wrote it as a memoir, and my editor read it, Tamar Brazes at Abrams, and she said, I love this. It made me cry. There are images in it I'll never forget. I think you should turn it into a novel. And, I didn't really know how to do that because I had been writing fantasy, and these characters were so close to home. They were my family. So I waited a bit, and I guess on the anniversary of my dad's death, I did write that first sentence, which stayed, throughout. About I can read it to you if you like.
Sure, please do.
It's the day my father's heart stopped. I discovered an extra heart deep in my belly, below my right rib. It talked to me. I wasn't crazy. Before that day, I just had one heart that never said a word. So suddenly there was Brianna. I mean, there was Brianna's voice. And she was 13 and she was missing her dad as I was. And I was off and running. But then the biggest surprise, to get back to the Find Her, the biggest surprise really as I was writing was that in a way, the process of writing this book was kind of going back and finding my own mother as well, who was my first writing mentor. And,
interesting.
Yeah. So the Find Her really was, the heart was saying that to Brianna, but it was also saying that to me. And, when folks ask me what most surprised me about writing the book, it really, what most surprised me was that it brought me kind of back to my mother, who was actually the model of Brianna's mom. She didn't have one green eye and one brown eye, but she had some of the characteristics of the mother in the girl with more than one heart, including being able to see the little everyday miracles of life.
Yeah, that was a really beautiful touch.
Thank you.
So she's grieving her father who passed, and it wasn't of a heart attack. It was of an electrical storm in the heart.
Yeah,
that's
an electrical storm in his heart. Yeah.
Which is not common.
Right. Exactly. It's not common. And it happens very suddenly and can happen to anyone to any person at any age.
Right.
So it had happened to a friend of ours. So I kind of used that.
It's interesting because sometimes, you don't, there's so many variables, and that's something, I learned something, and I had to go research that because I hadn't heard of that before. Mm-hmm. In the grief process, aside her mother, she can't seem to get out of bed. She also loses her two best friends, or at least starts to see the relationship for what it might have really been. Her friends are named Tina and Rena.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. And they're a little bit kind of mean girls. I mean, it's a growing up process of her kind of growing out of that friendship. She was kind of in the shadow of it and never got to really be seen as herself or to express herself very well.
And it seems to me also, like Tina and Rena. There, who is it? Is it was it the brother or the grandfather who refers to them as the, what is it? Push me, pull you.
Oh, it's Peter. It's her best friend.
Peter, who we haven't
Yes.
even gotten to yet. Because they're just like, they're so almost like dependent on one another. Like they're like, they're like together, pillars almost, together. And I'm wondering, when you were writing them, did you have in mind that maybe they just weren't mature enough to deal with a friend who was grieving? Or did you just kind of, was it the perfect storm, no pun intended, of her coming into this grief and them all growing apart at the same time? 13 is a rough age. I'll say that when these things happen.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think that she was sort of ready to outgrow them in a way, but they were also unable to really join her or support her in any real way when she loses her dad and when she has to take care of her brother more. So they just distance themselves and kind of reject her.
Yeah.
And that's a clear sign that she needs something more, that she needs a friendship, a real friendship. And she finds that in Daisy, who has a lot of things in common with her, who's an artist, as Brianna is a young writer, who is able to kind of join her imaginatively and enjoy the whole process of storytelling together, and is able to be fun and loyal.
One thing I really enjoyed was, and it tickles me that this has kind of become part of, just like the I don't know if zeitgeist is even the correct term, but just things that people talk about in passing, was that Daisy invited Brianna over to watch reruns of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Right.
And I remember, when the first episode premiered, and I had plans, and both myself and my friend conveniently forgot about our plans because we wanted to watch this. And then after it was over, we're like, oh no, I'm sorry, I forgot about that. There was just something on, and we're like, was it Buffy? So
Right.
I as a fan of Buffy myself, it tickles me to see it become part of just sort of this world that, hey, we watched reruns of Buffy, and I liked that you referenced that. And it's interesting because Buffy loses a parent, and she talks about that at one point,
Yes.
how Buffy has to be the one to carry on, which parallels Brianna in a way,
Yes, exactly.
without the demon fighting.
Yes. That episode where she loses her mother is so beautifully done.
It was
And
heartbreaking.
I've been a big fan of Buffy, and my son actually introduced me to Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
They
And
it was
so it was important to me to put that in the book. The TV show now that Brianna reminds me of, that I've been watching, is called Jane the Virgin. I don't know.
I've
if you've
heard that
come
that's
across
really
it.
good, and it's funny because a few people have recommended it to me, and I've not gone to see it, but not yet at least. But it's been recommended to me by several people.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's also, like Brianna, the heroine is kind of a good girl, but
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes needs to break out of that. And she is also a writer and loves to write stories. So her superpower in a way is her love of reading and her ability to write stories. And I love that about the show. And it also, the use of narration is quite wonderful. It's quite fun.
That's one to check out. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so
Another heroine where storytelling is her power.
so Peter, Peter is almost like her mainstay friend. They've been together for a while, and she's starting to feel maybe a bit of budding romance towards him, but she's not sure if it's the same way. And of course, as this is happening, she's her father passes away. She's constantly being pulled away from friends by having to take her brother to school where he's having his own issues with administration there. And Peter, it turns out, is having his own. It's like everybody is living their own story. So Peter has things going on behind the scenes as well. How did you how did you write his character into the story? Because he's a side character, but he's also central because he's always there in Brianna, for lack of a better phrase, in Brianna's heart and in her mind as she's going through
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, he is. He's like her rock in a way. And also he's a happy element in her life. I wanted there to be a lot of light and hope and love in this book. I mean, yes, it is dealing with the loss of a parent, but I felt like Peter was um, the character where Brianna gets to just enjoy herself and be a regular teenager and have a good time with her first kiss, which I remember very well. Still,
It was very sweet. It really was, and it did add that element of light to the story. And I liked, he was very supportive. I thought that was really good. And then so he also has a sister the same age as Brianna's brother. Now, what I found interesting, so Brianna's brother is starting kindergarten, and it seems like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the he'd been tested before as to whether or not he was on the spectrum.
Yes.
It didn't seem like his teacher was really equipped to handle the situation. Either that or she just didn't really understand. Clearly, the teacher recommends that he's left back, and that's not, I don't think that that's supposed to be the message you take away from that. But Brianna's mother, was she supposed to be reluctant to really facing what Aaron's needs really were, or was she just so absorbed in it?
I think I mean, this comes directly out of my own experience as raising a child on the spectrum, and a lot of what's in the book was sort of based on some of my experiences with some of the teachers. There's this chapter called Lights Alive.
That was my favorite. That was wonderful to me because that, really characterized Aaron and just who he, like his thought process. And because I know that there was a point where it mentioned that he'd been, Brianna remembered her parents talking about whether or not he had to be tested again.
Yes.
And, they were like, well, we've been through this before, but Lights Alive, I mean, that was Grandpa Ben really, he went to, if I remember correctly, he went to the parent-teacher conference with Brianna, and the teacher was trying to explain that he doesn't get this game at all.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, because he played it, and this was based really on my son who played this game, Lights Alive, which was in a little sort of plastic box-like game where these little lights went on and the child could design their own designs, and most children would just turn on the lights little by little, and then eventually there would be a whole design there. Whereas my son wanted the mystery of working in the dark and just deciding on the patterns in the dark, kind of with a lot of guesswork, and then ta-da, at the end of the day, just flip the switch and there would be this amazing and beautiful pattern. And that's the way he wanted to do it.
Which was so cool. I loved it. in
It
the
was,
book, the way it's done in the book.
thank you. But it came kind of emblematic to me of the experience of being a parent of a child on the spectrum, because he was doing stuff his own way, he was following his own rules, and it was very hard. It was impossible for him to explain to the teacher why he needed to do it that way, and it was very difficult for me to explain it either, and it just needed to be the way he did it, his own way, following his own rules. And so uh, I feel like the point of a lot of my father's stories to my son was, it's okay to be different. It's okay to play that game that way. It's
Sure.
okay to learn a different way and be different and just be yourself, be your own.
And that was
And
yes, and that was just so unfortunate to me that the teacher couldn't see that, that her solution was, well, he needs to be left back. That was
yeah,
unfortunate. It was unfortunate,
yeah, yeah.
to say the least.
Although, in real life, you know, my son did experience that in kindergarten,
Of
and
course, yeah. I mean, yeah,
it was fine. I mean, it
right.
was. He had 2 years with and it was fine. But it was when he was a kid, the term neurodiversity was not even invented yet,
Right.
and wasn't certainly what it is now in the society. So in a neurodiverse world, I mean, playing Lights Alive that way is cool.
Yes.
It's just fine.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I think the tech culture has kind of made a lot of these things also very, instead of this kind of alphabet soup of diagnoses, it's now, well, you're a geek or a nerd, you're kind of techie.
There's different ways of solving problems.
Yeah, exactly.
There's different diverse ways to get from point A to point B. And I would imagine, I would hope that now with neurodiversity being, a term and a thing that people consider in education, that teachers would look at students and be like, okay, is it just that they need a different avenue? What's really gonna fit? And sometimes one thing would fit, or that they would have thought of a while ago, or sometimes it's just a matter of channeling it in a different direction.
Yes, exactly. I mean, Lights Alive is one of the prompts that I use. This book has drawn me into this mission of helping children tell their stories. I created a writing workshop that was based on key phrases in my book, and one of them is actually Lights Alive,
Oh, cool.
about playing games by your own rules. By it goes. Lights Alive is a game that Brianna's little brother likes to play his own way, following his own rules and satisfying his own need for exploration and discovery. It symbolizes his unique way of looking at the world. Write about a game you like to play your own way, or a time when you didn't follow the rules. So that's one of the prompts of the many prompts, the 32 prompts that I created out of The Girl with More Than One Heart, encouraging kids to, I call it the Be Your Own Writing Workshop, and encourages kids to discover their own voices and tell their own stories.
Which is perfect, because the last thing I wanted to talk about was the Be Your Own Workshop. So I have that. Yes. So you let us write. See, we took different paths and we ended up where we were going anyway.
Excellent.
So let's talk a little bit about the Be Your Own workshops that have grown out of this book.
Yes. Well, it's been a wonderful collaboration with an amazing organization called First Book, which is an organization that has gotten actually about 170 million books into the hands of children in need. And I've worked with them for over 20 years. And when they read my book, they got very enthusiastic, and we had some wonderful conversations about it. And in the course of that, they really the phrase "be your own" from the book really caught their imagination, and they said, that's such a that encapsulates so much of our mission to empower children to be their own, to be their, to find their voices through reading and through storytelling, through telling their own stories. And so I sat down and went through the book and created these prompts, and I've been teaching the workshop in many states throughout the country, and in nonprofits and in schools and libraries, making it available to kids. It's been an amazing experience. I mean, I've been moved to tears by some of the unique and really deeply stirring tales that the students have read aloud using my prompts as inspiration. It's been a wonderful experience. So it's all about kind of the creating a platform for sharing stories. What happens is I go into a classroom, and I've created these cards, and each phrase is in a kind of a little heart, and the children receive the prompt cards, and there's always a moment when they're trading off and deciding which card they want. And then I draw this large heart on a kind of a whiteboard, and the kids free associate to their phrases and give me other phrases and words and sentences that come to mind when they see these words, and then to create a story we fill the large heart on the board with words and phrases, and then together we create a story from that. And then eventually the children also have time to write their own stories and then to share them with one another. So that's pretty much the Be Your Own workshop. I've used it also with Girls Right Now, which is another wonderful organization that I work with for high school girls. And my mentee is her name is Sarah Dean, and she's from Haiti. And she needed some prompts really to help her write about her experiences. She had joined Girls Right Now in order to be able to write through her experience coming to this country when she was 10 years old. She was in a very large earthquake and was buried in the earthquake with her brother, and then pulled out by a neighbor. And and she had tried to write that story over and over again, but had never been able to finish it. So her goal in joining Girls Right Now was to be able to kind of tell that tale. And she went through a few prompts. One was Grief Has a Long Tail, which she chose at first, but then decided she didn't want to do. Then she chose Say Goodbye, and I thought she was going to write about saying goodbye to Haiti, but she didn't want to do that either. And then finally she chose one called Hurricane, which is about writing about a disaster that's real or imagined as if you're in the middle of it, or as if it's happened long ago. And that was the one that she could use. And she wrote a beautiful story called Tomorrow, kind of based on her perception that you can't count on tomorrow. That people say, see you tomorrow, but you don't know.
Tomorrow never knows.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah. And it was really beautiful, and was published in the anthology for Girls Right Now last year.
Well, thank you so much for telling me about it. If people want to hear more about Be Your Own Workshops, where can they look? Is there a website?
Yes, they can. Thanks for asking. They can go to www.laurageringerbass.com. And they can also, if there are teachers and librarians listening who work with children in need, they can log on to firstbook.org and register. And my prompts, all 32 prompts, and how to use them, and tips and so forth about the workshop will be available to them as a free resource. So
that's great.
That's another website to check out.
Thank you so much, Laura. I want to thank you once again for sharing your time, your stories, your book, and letting us know about what you do, because it really is beautiful. And The Girl with More Than One Heart is a great, I would say, middle grade book with a lot of heart.
Thank you.
So
Thank you
yes,
much.
so I encourage everybody to who's listening to read it. And thanks again, Laura. And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.